I grew up in Kokomo, Indiana, ended up going to college at Purdue University, studying microbiology there. I studied piano, flute, oboe, and my oboe teacher wanted me to go to Ball State University and study music. But idea of becoming a music teacher was not what I really wanted to do, and I knew it would be very unlikely that I could get into a symphony orchestra. I did not want to be a music teacher because I do not like being around children that much. I ended up getting into ROTC at Purdue University. I had also considered going into the military academy, Air Force Academy, because they were just allowing women in. I think it would have been about the third class of women, if I remember right. But they did not really have the areas that I wanted to study. There is mainly engineering. And it was going to be, you'd have to get a congressman and all that to try to get into the military academy. But I grew up 15 miles from an Air Force base. So that's why I leaned towards the Air Force. In ROTC, your first 2 years, you do not have a commitment. Your junior and senior year, you've already made the commitment that you would go into the military. And so I had continued in ROTC past my sophomore year. So I had the commitment there. And I looked into getting a 2-year delay to go on active duty to get my master's degree in biology, because there was a few openings for laboratory officers, but there were very few openings, and even if I had got the 2-year delay, there was no guarantee I'd be a laboratory officer. I could have went into personnel, shoving papers, or working the flight line, counting bombs on planes, and I just didn't want to do that. I enjoyed the science area, and one of my instructors in ROTC recommended I try to get into meteorology. I went to Texas A&M University. 1 week after graduating from Purdue, I was at Texas A&M registering for classes. I met my husband at Texas A&M. He had already went through the meteorology program and had an assignment at Fort Lee, Virginia. Well, the Air Force was sending him back to Texas A&M to get his master's degree in meteorology. And one of our professors, he had known Paul when he was there before, and he knew my background was a microbiologist. Paul was also had a microbiology degree that the Air Force turned into a meteorologist. So he told us, you need to meet this guy that's coming back for his graduate degree. And so he came back in the summer. I started in January, went through December, and so he came around June, and that's when we met. I had got my dream dog, an Irish setter, and she fell in love with my husband, my boyfriend at the time. So we always joke that she's the one that made me marry him. She wanted to keep him. Instead of him bringing a dog home, she brought him home. She was also named Houdini. Being in the military, I would get deployed at times, so I'd have to have a kennel to keep her while I was away from home. And some kennels actually told me, do not bring her back. One kennel fell in love with her though, and they actually put Houdini on the outside of her cage, and they'd put a padlock on her cage, because before they started locking her up, she would get out of her cage at night, and then she'd pick another dog and let the other dog out. Then they'd play, then she'd get back into her cage and leave the other dog running around, get back into her cage. When I was stationed in Camp Red Cloud, Korea, which is in Uijeonbu, north of Seoul, Korea, one of our duties was to go up to the Korean military sites along the DMZ and train the Korean soldiers there to take weather observations. And my assistant, Captain Kim, he was an Air Force officer in the Korean military. It was his responsibility to go up there and train and I would fly up there with him just to show how important it was to America. I was the sole American face up there. Well, a lot of times they had not seen a female military officer in the U.S. government, and I remember one time we landed and they started pointing at me and they were asking Captain Kim some questions. Of course, this was all Korean. And they start going, "Tae-wee, Tae-wee," which I think they were surprised that I was Captain Kim's boss. And there was one pilot that his office was across from where my weather station was, and he'd always go, "Oh, Mrs. Place, you should be home with your husband." Well, our first Korean souvenir was one I brought back. He's our son, Matthew J. Place, and we kept his Korean first name as his middle name. I had, when I was deployed over in Korea for a year, remote, the church that I attended had worked with orphanages, and I had never taken care of an infant before my life. We went over to Korea and picked him up, and he cried from Seoul to Los Angeles. Korean women would take him and try to calm him down, but they couldn't. He had ear infections, and he was one sick little boy. And then after I got out and while we were over there, we looked into adopting another child. Well, policies had changed, and no, we could not adopt another infant from where we got our son. And I was teaching a Sunday school class, and an American teacher that I had met 3 years earlier when I was over in Korea, she was one of the friends I hung around with and did a lot of sightseeing with. She had switched to another school there, and she came to me one time and she said, "I have a child that the mother wants adopted." And so we ended up adopting an almost 13-year-old because she's half American, half Korean. And it would not have been an easy life. Her mother basically worked bars and cleaned houses. Our son Matthew, he got married about 2 years ago, and him and his wife are expecting their first child. It's going to be a son in June. They already have their own little baby, a hedgehog, named Lexi, because they bought her in Lexington, Kentucky. But he is a school teacher at a Christian school and basketball coach, which makes it difficult since he's a Korean 5'6" and he's a basketball coach. And our daughter Rochelle, she still lives on our property. She has her own apartment on our property, and she just got a new puppy that she's having to deal with, but she works as a certified nursing assistant and helps take care of elderly or handicapped in their homes. The snoring dog is Micah. He was actually our daughter's dog. We had moved into town to take care of my mother, and we were living with her, and our daughter was living in our house, and she found him underneath the porch. I have a Chihuahua named Honey. She was actually my mother's dog. When my father died, my mother died. Our daughter thought she was going to be getting her because Honey would bite me and everything when I was trying to take care of my mother. But my mother died, and 2 days later, Honey just started following me around and said, "You're my new owner."